Today I'm doing a reaction of a video that I was interested to see. I don't know if this will be posted on YouTube, so if it does, that means I thought the video was warranted. I just feel like this could be an interesting conversation. So let's lock in.
On Sprizzy through a Google search, pretty much. I was looking for a way to market our.
You can tweet all you want, but at the end of the day, lawmakers, rightfully so, only respond to what voters want. Their constituents are the people that actually go to the polls and vote for them. There's a reason why, criminal justice looks the way it does in the United States, and it's because the demographic of people voting are not the demographic of people that are most often impacted by the criminal justice system. And I think that, when we say like voting is the least we can do, I mean, young people don't do it. Like they don't vote. Like, and if you're not willing to vote, like.
We are live as it happens. Hello. Here we are in scenic. What city is this?
Washington, D.C.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. We just had Congressman Ro Khanna on talking about, well, a number of things, but mostly, I think, how to get people engaged. Vote Dems, ideally. I'm sure we all have somewhat aligned views on that. But
yeah.
To kick things off, I wanted to talk about.
Vaush doesn't look like a hippie. Hey, man. Shout out to him. Clean haircut can do a lot for a man. You know what I'm saying? Clean haircut can do a lot for a man.
About something that, at the very least, I know you and I have worked on. Progressive Victory, the fine people who set all this up. They're a canvassing org that we've thrown people towards as streamers. And as a result of that, thousands of folks have gone on out and canvassed. It's given me a lot of hope for, I guess, live streaming or new media as a mechanism for political onboarding. I was just curious what everyone's thoughts were on that with regards to like the new path forward.
You guys tell me, because I don't know what the young people are up to nowadays.
I feel like the two
Vaping, yeah, I do know. I have seen that.
I feel like the two important things for people are, if you're in the online content space, the rhetoric about like Dems and Republicans being the same has to stop. It's absolutely patently ridiculous. If you look at voting records, if you look at stance on issues, Democrats and Republicans stand in stark opposition to one another. So I think it's important to make it seem like voting for Democrats are a worthwhile proposition, if for no other reason because of the composition of the Supreme Court. And then
I mean, I agree. In terms of the ideology and the intricacies behind that, they for sure are not the same, right? We understand that, right? The problem is that the behavior that people see from both sides, especially the extremes, are very, very similar. The behavior of radicalism, the behavior of irrationalism, these things, at its core, when you're so endowed into a belief, is the problem for both sides. So, I get what he means by ideology. They are not the same. Whatever moral justice system that you believe aligns to whatever political ideology you follow, that's fine. But in terms of the actions committed, in terms of the behaviors acted upon the other, they're eerily similar, right?
And I think the second thing that's important is to make it seem like there is actual change that can happen if you engage with the system. And I feel like too many people are so quick to throw in the towel and say like, well, it doesn't matter who you vote for, it doesn't matter what happens, it's all politicians, it's all the same game at the end of the day, everybody has corporate buyers and lobbyists and blah, blah, blah. And I think at the end of the day, when you consume enough of that media, you feel like, why does it matter? Like, why engage at all? And that's really frustrating to me to say those two things. On a third thing too, it's hard to encourage this as a streamer because we are so national or international with our outreach. Getting more engaged at the local level, it's so easy to get engaged and see real tangible results from your actions than trying to engage at the national level where it's like I threw $5 at AOC and now I don't really know, what my impact is beyond that,
I mean, yeah, certainly. I think that it's very important to me.
I do want to say I very much agree to the point at the local level. If you follow my channel, if you follow my podcast, one thing that I am trying to push to people continuously is to be very active at the local level. The immediate change in your community, the best way for that to happen is for you to create or vote in state officials, local officials, mayors, etc., that align with your beliefs more so than anything else. the idea of America is supposed to be idea of unified power, but in relation to the unification of power, all the other pieces that make up the USA need to be powerful on their own, right? And in order for us to have that, we need people to be involved in their communities and be involved in their states. America is not supposed to be viewed as one entity, a federal government overreaching all the other things that encompass what America is. America is supposed to be seen as a powerful nation of a lot of different states and a lot of different cultures and a lot of differences that make up who we are through compromise. So that's super important that you get involved at the local level, you get involved at the state level. That way we can see better progression for each level, starting from the bottom and then obviously reaching our way to the top.
Make sure that your political engagement does not end with just voting, right? Like voting for Democrats is essentially it's essential, right? You have to do that. You have to vote for Democrats in general elections. I do believe that, but at the same time, that is one of like the least. It's the least you can do with political engagement, right?
Most people have no clue that in 2023, the best way to make money on Amazon is not.
Get involved locally, as you said. Get involved with your local DSA, because if it's just about electoralism, you're going to feel a little bit alienated, right? Because you're not Biden. For most young people, he doesn't represent them. Like he doesn't necessarily connect with them. And that's why voting, I would imagine, or I would advocate, should be something that you do, but not necessarily where your political engagement ends.
I agree with that, but I would say that voting is the most important thing, and almost nothing else matters if you're not willing to vote. There's way too.
I was literally gonna follow up saying that voting should be the most important, right? The foundation of your political activism should start with voting. Everything afterwards is more so should be seen as extra, pushing the cause. It should be something that you as an individual are willing to do based off what you want to get done. But every citizen, their priority, their utmost engagement should be voting. Not everybody wants to be politically active in the first place, right? It's exhausting, it's draining for a lot of people, it's very hard to understand. The average citizen doesn't want to get involved in these controversial topics. So at the very least, the best they can do is vote.
Too much.
I'm not going to
like
pause
online
as much.
activism. It happens in the streamer world, happens on the YouTube world, it happens on Twitter. You can tweet all you want, but at the end of the day, lawmakers, rightfully so, only respond to what voters want. Their constituents are the people that actually go to the polls and vote for them. There's a reason why, criminal justice looks the way it does in the United States, and it's because the demographic of people voting are not the demographic of people that are most often impacted by the criminal justice system. And I think that, when we say like voting is the least we can do, I mean, young people don't do it. They don't vote. And if you're not willing to vote, nobody's going to, and they shouldn't listen to you, because at the end of the day, a politician's job is to get reelected. And if you're not going to go out and actually show up and vote for said politicians, why should they ever listen to anything you have to say?
Yeah, and the NLRB and the FTC right now are probably the best cases to make that point, that politics and elections actually do matter. Because if you're somebody who says, well, actually, the only thing I care about is, organizing Starbucks or organizing Amazon or supporting like the UAW, if you don't have a National Labor Relations Board that is supportive of labor rights, it's going to be a much tougher climb. And even when it comes to antitrust and monopoly, that touches everything. Like the inability of people to make any significant revenue on podcasts is all about antitrust. The inability of people to kind of speak freely is related to the power of Silicon Valley that is now being contested by Joe Biden's FTC because he won and because he appointed people like Lena Khan. I think people like trash vote blue no matter who all the time, but there's actually, if you're on the progressive wing of the party, I've often seen that kind of used in reverse, in that, let's say you get John Fetterman across the finish line in Pennsylvania, he won a primary against a right-wing Democrat. Because vote blue no matter who exists, all of the kind of conservative Democrats in the state were like, all right, I'm voting for John Fetterman.
Yeah.
And actually, AOC gets knocked a lot for that mama bear comment that she made about Pelosi.
Well, it was true.
This she said that at the time where it looked like Bernie was going to seize the nomination. And so what she was trying to do is say, like, look, Bernie's going to be the nominee.
Right.
Pelosi is supportive of whoever the nominee is. Everyone else then needs to get behind Bernie. And you kind of use that vote blue no matter who momentum to say, look, you don't have a choice. He's the blue. So guess what? Vote for him. You're a socialist now.
100%. I mean, and by the true part, I just meant to say that, like, Nancy Pelosi, for all of her faults, she always had an ability to reach a bunch of different people in the caucus, right? And she developed those kinds of relationships, including with AOC. I thought what you were going to say was that some of the left online criticized the fact that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was using her excess fundraising money to help other Democrats in more vulnerable positions. And I found that criticism to be quite silly because that's an exercise in leverage, right? And she's using her political capital to get something done behind the scenes. And just because we don't see it in public, you're going to hear about that maybe in a year or so. Or you may never hear about some of the gains that she gets. But that's kind of the stuff that we don't see that happens when you actually have people who are sane in the positions of power. And Lena Khan, I mean, what is this? The best FTC chair that we've seen in
certainly
decades?
Most aggressive, yeah.
I mean, what, since the 60s or whatever? Same in terms of Biden's posture towards labor. So it's not about
I will
voting
say that
for
our
the person
changing
like they're a
our
celebrity.
voting
We're
system,
not electing class presidents.
changing our voting system could definitely help alleviate a lot of these issues in terms of voting pressure. I did a podcast episode where I spoke about the different type of voting systems you may want to hear about and potentially support to kind of get implemented at different elections throughout the country. And the current one we have kind of puts us in this stage where we're either voting blue or red no matter what, or we're voting of lesser evils, but doesn't really encapsulate our honest opinions about the politicians that we're putting into office in the first place. So changing our voting methods could definitely play a long benefit to the overall purpose of elections to start with.
Right, and it doesn't mean you endorse the drug war because you voted for Joe Biden.
This isn't The Bachelor, where you're not picking somebody to marry. You're picking somebody who's a figurehead, and all of the people that come along with that person, the people that are, heading those agencies. That's what you have to keep in mind. So it's this whole, it's broadening elections outside of celebrity to coalitions.
Yeah, and if you really don't like Manchin and Sinema, if you don't like these Democrats that sit right on the edge, the easiest way to take power from them isn't to primary them. It's to just have more Democrats in office. If there are 55, 57, 60 blue senators, Manchin and Sinema don't matter as much anymore because we don't need to appeal to them, to that very center-leaning, center-right-leaning political or economic agenda in order to get what we want through the Senate.
Although in some cases you can primary. If the Democrat is likely to win the general election, like in Arizona, then you can primary Sinema and Ruben Gallego.
Maybe Sinema.
In Arizona, maybe, yeah, but in West Virginia.
Forget about it.
Well, primaries have value.
Arizona's kind of wacky, though, but yeah.
The more democracy that exists, I think, is the better. And primaries have value in terms of also pushing incumbents where they don't feel too cozy. They don't feel like they can rest on their laurels and not represent people anymore.
I think, we're talking about electoralism, which is of course vital, but I think that at the fundamental, personal level, so often it's about convincing a person that what they can do can make a difference, on any level. I saw the most incredible statistic the other day. Apparently something like 60% of the book bans in this country, school boards banning this because they mention gay people in it or something, all that. There's been thousands of them, right? 60% of them from 11 people. Just very dedicated folks calling around. They're not in the district, they're just calling around, making a fuss, traveling. It is remarkable, especially at a local level, how much.
Johnson, why are you naked? Because my.
Very, very interesting statistic, but I'm not surprised. Again, I'm going to have to plug my podcast again because this is something that I talked about after I came to the realization that people's idea that the country is run by the majority is flawed. It's wrong, actually. In reality, the country and its biggest changes and biggest achievements are due to the minority. The minority runs the country more so than the majority. In order for things to get done, obviously the majority has to be on board, But for things to get ignited, for the key to be, starting the ignition, in order for that to happen, that is going to be by the minority. That's going to be by the minority population, minority community. Just like Vaush said here, it took 11 people, and I don't even know it's true, but to go online with the logic, it took 11 people to get 60% of the book bans done. And that's just consummate effort, consummate support, consummate advocacy. The people are given this weird false viewpoint on what it means to be involved into politics, right? People got this idea in their head, and I used to have this idea when I was younger to an extent, that if I vote in the federal election, it won't matter. That's the extent of my political advocacy, right? Obviously, I adhere to what I said earlier. Your voting is the most important thing you should do. We should change the voting systems to better adhere to the truest opinions of the candidates and the policies. But with that said, it's still a vote, one vote. And even though I think that is the most important thing, for the people out there who want real change, who go into this emotional spiel that they want X, Y, and Z done in the country, that is going to take another level. That's going to take another step. And the lies you've been told about you being involved won't do anything is false. Because like I said, what gets done is not the majority, it's the minority. It's you being dedicated to get something done. It's you being involved. It's you networking. It's you reaching out. It's you communicating. So I think that is something that is so important for people to know, because this false assumption that unless the entire country or 51% of the country agrees to something, then we'll get something done. Well, how do you convince that 51% in the first place? Because I guarantee they're not even thinking about what you're thinking about right now. Now, there's dangers to this, because you could have extreme, very ludicrous thoughts come out, like maps, like the KKK. And that's when it's the majority's part to get involved, to realize that this is ludicrous behavior. But that shouldn't stop you for having a solution that can better society as a whole, which my podcast does consistently.
I've heard stories of like housing developments held up because one old lady goes to every single city council meeting. She knows every single person on the board, and she's always giving speeches. There's a joke I tell on my stream. There's a stoplight outside my house I hate it, and they were finally marking the stoplight for deletion. And I remember one day this lady knocked on my door, and she had a little petition to sign to save the stoplight. And I'm like, no, this stoplight is the dumbest stoplight in the world. I'm so glad it's changing stop signs. I have a son. I walk into school. It's not a dangerous intersection. And I kind of laughed it off, and she walked away or whatever. And 2 weeks later, God damn it, she saved the goddamn stoplight. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, I should have been running a counter petition. But there is an ungodly amount of power available, but it's at the local level. And that's not sexy. Everybody wants to talk about Biden and Ukraine and AOC, and that's it. And then it's well, who's your mayor? What do you do locally? Because that's where just 5 or 10 people can sometimes exert massive influence on some of your policies. But it's just not, it's not talked about on Twitter as much, so nobody goes for it as much.
You go to almost any city, and the downtown area is almost completely controlled civically by city councilors who are in the suburbs. So to them, it's just a shopping destination. But for 100,000 people, it's home. And there's this disconnect. And it's almost always because the people in the suburbs are old and retired and have the time to run and the money to run, and they show up. And that is to their benefit, but there's nothing about that isn't transferable to a young, just out of college, sort of entrepreneurial, engaged activist. It can be done, but a lot of people, especially on the left, it's not that they set their hopes too high. Hope should be high. But the expectations of what any individual can do, I think a lot of people are touting around, historical revolutionary dreams, when in reality, the real way you get power in this country and in any situation is by knowing who your local councilors are and calling them often enough to be annoying. That showing up is 90% of political power. And a lot of people don't want to do that because it's not sexy. And I think that making that sexy, or at least convincing people it's worthwhile, that's a really big part of it.
I also wish for a lot of far left, because I've probably fought with all of you at some point over far left activism online. I wish that instead of...
I'm sorry.
You might not know me, but okay. instead of
don't
pushing,
remember.
sure.
He owned you so hard you forgot.
Absolutely, yeah. Lots of Twitter
No,
clips.
I know you debated Sam, but I don't really know anything else.
Sure, it's possible.
I don't remember any
sorry.
fight.
Okay, that's all good. You drank a lot, I guess. No. Instead of like or, I wish it could just be like and. Like instead of looking at the mainstream Dems won, it's either them or my progressives, and since they won, now I'm checked out of the process. Like how many people were disillusioned after Bernie lost, and it's like, oh, super delegates suck and the system sucks, then you disengage. I wish there was more of like it's good to vote blue and to get Dems in, and we need to build on this and move it further left than say somebody like me would want. But moving and moving and moving while still supporting the establishment, rather than being like, well, if the establishment is winning, I don't want anything to do with it. I'm going to unplug completely until I get like my ideal socialist revolution or progressive revolution or whatever. I think that disconnect is just so cancerous for young people. I don't want to make Feinstein jokes here, but like if young people voted, the composition of Congress would be way different, right? It would be way, way, way different if the electorate was more evenly composed of all the age groups rather than skewing so heavily towards only older people that seem to be more, like you said, live in the suburbs and are more plugged in. And yeah.
What I'd say to that is that those young people that you're talking about who got disaffected by the results of the 2016 primary, they're not an organized bloc. They're not really a thing. They're a lot of people who have, ideas about things. The party establishment is an organized thing, and so in that sense, between those two groups, the party establishment has a lot more agency. They can organize together. They can meet, and they can decide how they're going to interact with their, at that point, junior coalition partner member. They decided through 2016 that they were going to, treat them like, crap, and they then paid a price for it. So you can say that, well, people should be bigger than that and not worry about how they're treated. And okay, fine, that's legit. But at the same time, if you have something within your control, you got to do better than that. And and I think the party establishment has learned, like the way that the party establishment, Schumer in particular, even Hakeem Jeffries since he became House leader, has not been going to war against the kind of grassroots base on the left in the.
When you're building.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation when it comes down to young people and being active into politics. Because like even for me, who had these pretty grandiose ideas in terms of society, especially even back in when I was back in high school, when I turned 18 and I was in college. Well, when I turned 18, I was out of high school. I didn't vote. Back when I was in college, I didn't vote. Back when I was in the military, I didn't vote. And my thing is like there's no proper incentive. Voting seemed like an extra thing you can do. Despite it being around me enough at my college institution, there's still this feeling that I don't care. It doesn't matter, right? In order for me to truly care about politics, I had to kind of force my way in there in a way where I absorbed a lot of content, my ideas got consolidated, and I started realizing a lot of people are just wrong about a lot of things. So, with that said, maybe the best way to kind of convince young people to get involved in politics is to play to their ego. That's a thought.
APAC to like back off of going after the squad. Part of that is the squad being much more team players than they started out as. But that doesn't explain Schumer. Like Schumer too has just been close friends with Bernie, and like so doesn't create the opportunity for people to be furious at the establishment.
Speaking of Schumer, this is a bit of a left turn, but what is your assessment, Ryan, as a reporter, you can put on your hat a little bit here, reporter cap, about Schumer's reticence to get Menendez to resign? Like, do you think that we're talking about a massive 2024 election where it's likely Biden versus Trump, and a lot of the thrust of what Democrats will argue, is that Trump is corrupt, he can't be trusted. It undercuts it a little bit if Menendez is hanging by a thread in the Senate. Why hasn't Schumer called on him to resign?
I think he thinks that this will work itself out eventually.
Yeah.
At his press conference on Tuesday, he said Menendez is going to be here speaking to the caucus Wednesday. We'll see how that goes, and then I'll talk about it afterwards. Didn't go great, but he's just trying to put it off. He hopes that it will, I think, resolve itself. The fact that they're all in the tri-state delegation and have 40 years of experience together,
yeah.
God knows what what kind of relationship they've had over the years.
Yeah.
Uh, there's also the personal. You know, they've obviously just known each other for that
between
entire
Feinstein
time.
and Menendez.
Yes.
It's
That puts them down to 49.
It's looking a little dicey
if
over
he
there.
resigns.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, Senate congeniality is a freaking disease. Like the idea that these massive decisions are being made based on personal relationships in this way. Like, say what you want about the House, but at least there's this more semblance of direct democracy there and a bit more accountability. Because it's incredibly frustrating, I think, for people like talking about alienating voters. How recalcitrant the Senate is enormously, I think, demobilizing, especially when you can't get anything past the filibuster unless it's some sort of budgetary measure.
I think that's part of why people talk about like the effectiveness of a lawmaker, because to some extent politics is it's a game that you play. It's a skill that you exercise. It's not just a matter of like, well, I'm going in today to vote for exactly what my constituents want, because if you play it in that way, other senators that are working kind of more on these interpersonal relationships are probably going to have an edge in terms of different types of legislation or different types of deals that they're making on the floor. I understand the frustration, but I think that's probably just like an inevitable part of any republic, of anything where you've got like representatives going in and voting. Even on like local levels, like those interpersonal relationships are really important for, in some ways it's negative because it feels like you said it's alienating, like, well, why isn't he representing me? He's friends with this guy for 40 years. I guess screw me, right? But then in another way, ideally in an ideal world, there are people that are able to cut deals or push people a little bit more because of those relationships they have. So, but
though towards like authenticity, it is worth noting, of course, that there are just the other day at the same time that.
I tend to pause after Destiny because I tend to agree with a lot of things Destiny says. We kind of align in a lot of opinions. There's a lot of nuance in terms of the relationships between senators in these powerful positions and politicians in general. And it's really hard to kind of figure out a way to alleviate potential fraternization between officials, favors between officials, favors between millionaires and officials, right? So it's tough because yes, we want them to be like objective in all decisions they make, but at the same time, there needs to be a realization that these people are also human, right? A lot of the times, the people in the public square, in the public in general, kind of perceive these figures that distance themselves from you, but are put on a pedestal higher than you as less than human or higher than human, but not human, right? And that is just a false way to think. Because just think to yourself, you've been friends with this one guy for a very, 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 very long time. You both become senators. And then with that said, you guys are trying to progress the ideology or the movement. And then your friend decides to make a big mistake. And that mistake could potentially get him impeached, maybe in jailed, right? So the general public, after hearing some articles, are going to turn on this friend of yours. But what's the expectation for you as a fellow senator and a fellow friend? Is the expectation to immediately turn on them as well? Or is the person going to wait until they get all the information and finally make a proper decision on what is going on? So I get being upset, but sometimes we need to empathize a little better on these positions themselves. I know it can be tough. I know it can be outside the qualms of thinking based off your personal experience, but will be the best way to move forward, of course.
Democratic senators were increasing in number with calls for Menendez to resign. House Republicans on the impeachment inquiry committee were publicly saying that they would not support following through on any criminal condemnations of Donald Trump following guilty verdicts in the indictment. So while in the House the Republicans are just we don't believe in the rule of law. At least there's something here. I mean, Menendez, it's like a cartoon character, right? He's got gold bars stuffed in the lining of his coat. It's spilling out of his pockets as he runs out. So it's an easy target, even any condemnation puts us ahead of the Republicans. But obviously, it should be a clear shot. Though, again, with the Senate being so weak, or our hold on the Senate being so weak at the moment, I guess I can understand
Do I react to music? No, I don't.
Them being these them thinking that, I mean, I joke about how the Supreme Court thinks they're the high priests of the United States. I mean, the Senate feels like they act as if they're, I don't know, some sort of member of
The Supreme Chamber,
the clergy or something like
The
that.
upper part of the Congress, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it should go the way of the House of Lords in the UK and just basically be ornamental.
Do your guys' viewers know that he was already indicted?
Yes.
In 2018.
Yeah.
He made history. He's the first senator
It was a hung
in
jury.
the
He wasn't even
history
acquitted.
Technicality,
of the
yeah.
United States
Yeah.
to be charged with, while in office, with two separate criminal indictments. And knowing the history of the U.S., like going back to the
It's impressive.
1800s, that
Yeah.
really is a record-breaking performance.
I
mean,
kind of
honestly.
respect it, honestly. It's so straightforward. It's cartoonish, there's no subtlety.
Yes.
It's just a clear layup. You get off in a technicality, gold bars, whatever. Yeah, it's no surprise young people have trouble feeling like there's any kind of meaningful inroad to political engagement here when it does feel like, you know who you know, and that's politics. It's not entirely true, right? I mean, Bernie did a lot running, as a Democrat from independent. But it's just so hard. I see all the Twitter engagement, right? All the lefties.
Why are these people just watching them? That is so weird. What is this? What is this right here? This is weird as hell. Like, I agree, I get it, it's a good conversation, but like, what the hell? Like, why am I here just watching people talk? Is that normal? Is it any different than what I'm doing now, watching on a screen? Watching someone talk in person versus watching someone talk on a screen, is that different? I guess it just looks strange, right? In this environment, where I can at the very least make content. Maybe they just want to hear the conversation. I don't know.
Both parties are the same, like you said, that rhetoric. People are very, very, very quick to distrust. You mentioned the AOC, the money going around to help other weaker candidates. They see that as a sign of corruption somehow. Any connection, any tie, any engagement with people who aren't completely pure. Hell, Bernie endorsing Biden. That was seen as a sign of weakness. Now, I understand oppositional politics to a degree, but we have to work along a little, to some extent at least. I just don't know how to best sell people on that, that coalition mindset that you can actually do work from one side of it rather than just being the totality.
I think it's also important to note that, like, while
I'm going to repeat it again, that one big way we can do that is changing our voting system so politicians don't feel like it's all or nothing and doesn't have to demonize everybody that's against them, but just be true to themselves and true to the motion that they're pushing. We can do a lot. We can really change politics to a large extent if we change the way we voted as a step. It's not going to be the perfect solution, but it's a step towards a better way of politicking.
on social media, it feels like, depending on the bubbles you inhabit, a lot of it looks like leftist infighting depending on the circles that you're in. The leftist infighting on the left is largely still, I think, like a figment of social media. But the infighting on the right, the Republican Party is legitimately threatening to tear itself apart under the weight of God knows what all the Donald Trump stuff is, the however many different charges he's.
This is where I'm going to have to disagree with Destiny here. Now, I do think the Republicans are tearing itself apart with this Trump stuff. But if Trump... This has to be Trump's last chance, right? Like, there shouldn't be any more Trump after this. And then they probably can get back to normal to an extent. But I think both sides are having issues dealing with the right radical sides of their ideologies, of their movements, versus the more reasonable center sides, right? So I think that's the biggest issue for both sides, but I also will disagree with Destiny in terms of the interpretation of social media, although can be a mirage of the current state of the perception of the left. But as I adhere to my beliefs that the minority can make such a huge difference into politics. The vocal radicals on the left have definitely showcased their presence known more so than a lot of other people. But the question is, how much does that vocalization translate to advocacy? So that's something we would have to determine.
Facing the fact that he's still so far ahead in the Republican nomination process, and the fact that there are still like a decent number of Republicans that won't support him. It only takes 5 or 10% to effectively destroy the Republican Party to pull away from him. That whole process is going to be
Great time to
amazing.
be alive.
Yeah, maybe. Well, there's still there's the
wacky.
hellscape future where Trump wins the election somehow.
It's over. It's Jover even.
Yeah.
I lose joke at that.
I feel like the fact that so many people still support him is almost like on it's Jover territory. That's unbelievable.
It's
So,
like you can't. This is why Joe Biden's approval ratings are low, right? It's because you can be a Dem who will vote for him, but not approve him. Like, if you ask me, do I approve of him? Well, no, because he's not, a communist or whatever. But I'll vote for him. I'll advocate for him. Whereas with Donald Trump, the line between, or the Venn diagram of supports and will vote for, it's one. There's one circle,
Yeah.
Very little
Although
dissonance there.
there is like 10% or so of Trump supporters who will say, yes, I believe he's guilty and should be in prison.
yeah.
And then will also vote for him.
Incredible brains.
I mean, many people are saying he's the Eugene Debs of the 21st century. But I mean, honestly, like that does bring up something interesting here, because Biden's approval ratings are really low, but that's not translating to Democrats at the polling not polling locations, but you know what I mean. In these
special elections.
Special elections, right? And even in 2022, normally, like in 2010, when there was this big backlash to Obama, that was not seen in 2022. And I just think it's a really fascinating dynamic to unpack, how Biden's presidency and his approval numbers appear to be a bit untethered from Democrats and the negative partisanship that they're able to engender when Trump comes up, right? Curious about any of your guys' thoughts on that front.
Abortion rights, I think.
Right.
I think if you don't have Roe overturned, then you're not seeing the overperformance in special elections that you have now. But what it did is it.
Do you think January 6th too?
A little.
Yeah.
Yes, like that helped congeal the already partisan stew that was cooking at that time. But I think putting abortion rights on the ballot in a way that they hadn't been before, like Republicans had always said, like basically abortion rights are on the ballot. We're going to elect us. We're going to appoint judges that are going to overturn Roe v. Wade, and that drove out their voters. Democrats they felt the whole issue was icky and wouldn't talk about it. Mm-hmm. And also Democratic voters are so used to hearing Democrats like cry wolf about, George H.W. Bush was going to be like the one that ended democracy or something. So like saying every 4 years saying that like Roe is going to be overturned fell flat, even though it was true under Trump in 2016. Now nobody can question whether or not it's on the ballot. In some states it's quite literally on the ballot in terms of a ballot measure. In Virginia in a couple weeks, Youngkin, if he gets a trifecta, he'll be under pressure to push abortion restrictions. Basically any place at this point, the vote, your vote has something to do with abortion rights, and so you're like, you know what? I don't care about anything else, but I do care about this, and that's enough to bump that number up.
Really quick point, and then go ahead, Vaush. But that also really undercuts Trump needs more suburban women to come after him if he wants to win in 2024, and this does not help him. Go ahead.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, it feels like for the longest time, corporate politics were always on the table, but for a lot of culture issues, it was always play fighting, right? Oh, they're going to revoke Roe v. Wade. Oh, they're going to overturn democracy. Oh, this, that, and like maybe, but eh. And then in I guess, 2016, 2017, whenever it became apparent, someone threw an actual punch, and it's like, oh,
you're really going to do this.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Also, a really unlucky confluence of stupid things. Of RBG not retiring when she should have. Of Merrick Garland, which we'll never get revenge for, not that I'm a big fan of revenge politics, but that we actually lost a Supreme Court pick that was like dutifully Barack Obama's. Like these things coming together. And then, Donald Trump getting so many Supreme Court justices was incredibly unlucky. And then,
thank God he's a completely ineffective president, or he might have done real damage during his first term. I mean, maybe second term he does more. I don't want to give him the chance. It's just, Yeah, I don't know. Young people get this, I think, because young people now, they're growing up in a world where there was no play fighting. At least, somebody's like 18 now. For their whole cognizant life, it's been real. But for a lot of older people, that's one of those criticisms of the Dems, right?
It's been really real for millennials. God damn, I graduated high school in 2007. So we entered, a lot of us got into college, and then like right off the back of like the huge recession, which was crazy, and then now there's fucking COVID, and Jesus Christ, yeah.
Yeah, if you take a look at the median wealth distribution across generations, it's like right after Gen X, and Gen X doesn't have it great either, but after them, it's like falling off a cliff, any millennial, Gen Z, now Gen Alpha, I mean, the only wealthy people from these generations are live streamers and crypto grifters, it seems. Outside of that, long-standing, successful family-building careers are few and far between, and I think that's really reflected in the hopelessness and ennui of the generations.
You forgot to add
That's a very good point. Very good point. I think Emma's best.
people that don't buy avocado toast.
Oh, obviously, right.
Yeah.
And people who stay with their folks till they're 30.
Is that going to change?
That's a very good point when it comes down to people's dissatisfaction with America and how it's turning. The ability to kind of just live a content life is so difficult nowadays. It's mind-blowing how difficult it is for just to live a content life. Like, someone does everything right, go to high school, go to college, they have to find a job they hate, which I guess, to be fair, could be similar to back then as well. But they find a job, and a lot of these jobs don't even pay enough for them to live on their own, right? Don't pay enough for them to have normal groceries. Don't pay enough for them to have health insurance and car insurance. It's so disturbing. It's so disturbing. I guess there might need to be a should it be, in terms of content creation, should there be a stronger funnel to create jobs from content creation, since that seems to be the new wave? There is kind of that already, with like people looking for thumbnail makers and people looking for video editors and stuff. But these people are treated more so as like freelancers, and the pay is generally based off the person. It's so hard. It's so hard to kind of determine, because like some of the biggest content creators have a staff. It's a interesting thing about.
Change if these kids start, kids, they're in their 30s now, start inheriting money, like as their parents.
I hope
Great
it doesn't.
boomer die-off. We're finally waiting. It's finally almost around the corner. I feel like we've been talking about it for like 15 years.
Speaking of play fighting, yeah,
there's the
for
big
20
boomer die-off. That's going to be like and also like a huge demographic change.
What does that do to the structural
I
politics?
hope it doesn't. We've seen that, like, they're not shifting rightward the way people, like, generations trend towards when they get older. And obviously, like, there's a systemic issue here, right? You can fix it with one big cash grab for a generation, or some of them at least. But then the next generation's going to have the same issue. A lot of this ties back to housing. Nobody can afford housing right now. Nobody.
Yeah, I
Like,
was gonna
zero
say,
people can afford houses.
City planning is like this intractable problem that nobody seems to be able to get right. And I think even if you look at like California, you've got like, what was that $1 billion train line to nowhere? Like, if even in some of these like left-leaning places, we can't figure out good city planning, good public transport, every place is becoming increasingly unaffordable.
Billions spent on high-speed rail, not even broken ground.
And
Just
there's so much like
avoid.
There's a lot of conflicting pressure too on housing prices, where people are asking for basically contrary things without realizing it. Like, housing is becoming increasingly unaffordable because there are so few houses available. People want student debt forgiveness so they can afford houses, which would just drive housing prices up if every student had an extra $20,000 to buy houses. Interest rates are finally going up, which are making houses unaffordable, but it's supposed to drive down demand. Like, the housing market is just in a super huge mess right now, and we're trying to combat it with so many tools beyond just like what we really need is really just like the aggressive rezoning of housing districts.
The Times had an article the other day that said that Tokyo has built more units in the last couple decades than exist in total in New York City.
Yeah,
And as
not
a-
even surprising.
And as a result, people say, well, it doesn't have anything to do with the price. As a result, it's actually affordable to live in Tokyo. Like you
Yeah.
Tokyo is the only city in the world that has managed to. Japan has a really aggressive housing policy for Tokyo. Yeah.
We need to repeal the Faircloth Amendment. I mean, the AOC kind of had I think a bill that came up in 2018.
What's that one do?
That's the one that bans basically all federal funding for public housing, and it's been in place since
Cool.
1998. Yep, that was a good Clinton special, right, for
Classic.
the neoliberal turn, and it's just still been.
Did she sort of repealed it or something? I remember it coming up.
Bernie and her were working together on it, and then I just think it died. I don't remember. I mean, it's difficult, obviously, to get anything through the Senate, anything like that's not budgetary related.
I think it's really funny how this was framed as like a coastal elite problem, LA, New York, whatever. And then in 3 years, housing prices in Florida have gone up like 40% or whatever.
Alabama, I think, is up like 20% a year over year for like 4 years in a row.
Everywhere you move to,
Yeah.
it was framed as like, oh, it's California. And it is to an extent, but it will be everywhere. Everywhere short of like Wyoming. And probably even there is going to have this issue. It's really just we somehow coordinate massive rezoning across the country at a local level, or some kind of federalized, subsidized housing, preferably better than the ones we've tried before. You know, those weren't great. Or, you know,
you could make federal money available to cities that fix their problem.
better that than highways.
Yeah, but
People
like,
are
here,
tearing
look,
down their
you
highways.
fix your zoning problem, you crush your NIMBYs, then you get free housing.
Yeah, I
and,
feel
and
like
there's only enough for 10 cities. And everybody, go.
I feel like the issue that you run into, though, is this feels like a huge, like an external failure of democracy, and that all of your voters that are your strongest voting base in these cities are the ones that are most incentivized to vote against like new housing. Because like the people that are most harmed by lack of available housing in any particular city are future residents, are people that could move in and take advantage of lower prices that are now not able to. And then if you are living in a suburb in California, goddamn, I lived in Glendale, Culver City, Huntington Beach. There are so many of these places where you're in an apartment and like across the street from you are these like borderline dilapidated houses that sell for like $750,000 each, and it's like these people don't want to see high density, housing go up. These people don't want to see all these condos or all these new apartments go up because now it's going to threaten their property value. So I feel like you run into a weird conflict of interest there, where you're incentivized as somebody that is in that area to vote down and to be a NIMBY, like you actually are rewarded for it. I don't know what
The good news is we won't have any homeowners pretty soon.
Yeah, wow.
It'll just be two.
Just
like,
renters,
Well, I mean, or you could go.
Vanguard and BlackRock or whatever.
I mean, you could just Prop 13 your way away from property taxes, so people would just stay in their house forever and then never have to deal with.
Well,
right?
another big one is the if you own it can't be treated as a speculative investment. If you own a property and no one's using it, like you're waiting to sell it off, or that just it can't be allowed. Tax it so heavily that they have to put it out. Lower the prices. There's no ideal here, right? Like the ideal is everyone just acts in their best interest, and all the young people go out and do the city council voting. But like this is an unworkable problem.
Right,
Like
'cause
no one can afford anything
'Cause
right now.
Right now, you've got private equity with cash making a bid on, say, a $500,000 house. They have the cash; so they don't have to take any. They don't have to pay the 7% mortgages. And then you have it against a person who managed to scrape together a down payment, and then has to pay a 7% interest rate. Like that's an unfair fight. The homeowner is going to take the cash offer every single time. And so,
And private equity is buying up a
buying
ton of
everything.
apartments in New York City. My apartment complex got bought by a private equity firm
just
during
sits empty.
COVID.
They're going to own like half of the housing
and they
stock
treat us
within
like
10 years if we don't
garbage.
stop.
Like
Yeah.
they don't repair anything, and we can't get through to them. I mean, that's a whole nother saga. But
They probably want you to leave so they
oh
can
yes,
like
well
renovate
it's
and
rent
then
it's
upsell.
rent controlled. So
Right.
they do. So they want me to leave anyway. But Ryan, I actually was reminded when you're talking about a piece you wrote a few years ago that still sticks in the back of my mind about.
Oh, that's such a tough thing. I do have a podcast episode actually next Monday, which is funny, where I'm gonna have someone on and they're going to talk about their solution to kind of fix the housing crisis, right? So maybe we'll learn something that episode.
The potential commercial housing bubble. That is also something that we should monitor, because private equity was also, and venture capital, I believe, buying up a ton of those commercial real estate properties, and they were pretty overinflated, if my recollection serves me.
That was before the pandemic.
Yeah, like, do you have any updates on that?
People who watch that are just deeply frightened. They're like, this is
Yeah.
the CMBS, the commercial mortgage-backed security market, it has like so many of these traders scared. Is it going to be another like
Yeah.
mortgage-backed security meltdown like we had in 2007. What they're trying to do now is turn them into residential properties, and all different Fed action is trying to like keep the bubble from bursting. But you're in New York, you're seeing a lot of that, right? They're turning them into half residential buildings or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The issue's been exacerbated heavily by everyone working at home too. Yeah. So you go downtown and you see like rows and rows of dead, empty corporate office buildings, and like for lease available in every commercial and office district. And then you go check Zillow, and like a house that was 150,000 10 years ago is now.
Those are the interest groups that are also pushing people to return to work, get back into the office. These real estate groups
More
that
rent.
don't. That, yeah, right.
A lot of these are 5 and 10 year leases, so it holds off the calamity a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, this is an issue.
Oh, good. Holds off the calamity.
Yeah. I understand people want to rail against like private equity or large firms buying up houses and everything. I feel like this is a small issue. I know that people like to fixate on it, but the only reason why private equity goes after this property is because it's so goddamn lucrative, because there are so few housing units available. People want to fight when it comes to the housing issue. It's like one of those things that appears simple, and then when you read more, it's really complicated. But then I think when you read more, it's actually really simple. Like the only way that housing ever gets fixed in the United States or in any part of the Western world is to build more units. Rent control.
Or to decommodify it.
No, decommodification doesn't create more space, though. You have to have more places for people to live. Like rent control.
Decommodify. I'm gonna look up what decommodify means. In political economy, decommodification is the strength of social entitlement and citizens' degree of I always get this word wrong. Immunization. Why do I feel like it's something else? Immunization from market dependency. Let's read more. Hold on. In regards to the labor force, decommodification describes the degree to which individuals or families can uphold a socially acceptable standard of living independently of market participation. While commodification is the transformation of goods, services, ideas, and people into commodities or objects of trade, decommodification will be the extent that workers can leave the labor market through choice. Let's see what Destiny says about it.
Simple, and then when you read more, it's really complicated. But then I think when you read more, it's actually really simple. Like the only way that housing ever gets fixed in the United States or in any part of the Western world is to build more units. Rent control.
Or to decommodify it.
No, decommodification doesn't create more space, though. You have to have more places for people to live.
So I agree, because decommodification, based on how it was explained based off the definition, yes, that may help with a more affordable homes to buy. But like Destiny said, there's still not going to be a lot of space for people to live in, right? So just building more homes can decrease the market cost, and at the same time, obviously, create homes for people.
Like rent control has been thoroughly studied as a horrible way of trying to continue like housing stuff. Like building like luxury condos is good for everybody because people move up into other condos and make stuff available for people. You can get rid of private equity, but there's still going to be people that buy houses. You can try to get rid of like all landlords, but there's still going to be a lot of people chasing these few units. I think it's at the end of the day, it's more a physics problem than any type of economic problem. You just have a lot of people that want to live in an area with not enough houses available. And as long as we keep trying to like nibble at the edges by going after like vacant units, of which there are very few of in the actually like highly populated areas, or going after like private equity who are only making money because there's so few units available, or like by trying to decommodify housing.
But I think it's both too, because of the political economy. Because think about it, if that little lady had that much power to save the stoplight, if private equity rolls everything up and is benefiting from low housing supply, private equity also owns most of Washington. So they're going to be able to stop the solution that you want.
Homeowners benefit from low housing supply too, though. That's the issue.
But but the people owning homes will be a minority pretty soon. So there'll be fewer people benefiting. It'll just be
Possibly.
private equity.
Yeah, I guess it depends on.
I mean, that's the direction of the chart.
Sure.
There's no way out of this besides upzoning. That's like an inevitable. I mean, behind us right now, I grew up in.
Upzoning. Let's look this up. You know, it's so great to be a streamer because, like, you don't have to go to work or anything because your stream is your work, so you can just dive into all this stuff full hell. Oh man, I am man. Define upzoning. Bro, I'll be like Ben Shapiro. I'll be reading books, but like I just got no time to do any of that. Upzoning is a term used to describe changes to a zoning code made to increase the amount of development allowed in the future. Upzoning is a commonly used term in urban planning that describes an alteration to a community zoning code to allow new capacity for development. Upzoning is distinct from rezoning, which usually indicates a zoning change pertaining to the allowable land use of potential development. When trying to understand the effect of an upzoning, the building envelope established by zoning code can be helpful conceptual reference. The building envelope describes the potential for development in the city. The physical extent in the abstract of future development capacity allowed by the zoning code. The process of upzoning expands that building envelope. Okay, pretty simple. Allowing more space to create more development by rezoning, but also expanding at the same time. I can see how that would be beneficial.
In LA, most of it's single-family homes. Every separate home is separated by a 5-mile plane of road and grass that dies in the summer and the fall and the spring now. As a lot of it's also city planning. We build our city so you have wide swaths of residential, and then everyone wants to shop right here, which means a lot of people got to drive there. You don't have these issues to the same extent in like Paris. Relative to population density, you want to go somewhere in Paris, you're above a coffee shop. There's something. That's not a suburban flavor. I think so many of these issues, it seems so difficult to solve because once you start talking about redesigning cities, this is no longer a federal issue. You can offer money, but at the end of the day, I mean, a big mobilization campaign to get 5 million young people to go to their local city council meetings? There's an upper limit in terms of like immediate action, but we need that,
Yeah.
Although we are redesigning the cities at least because we're being forced to since the commercial buildings are.
Yeah, Seattle's been building a ton of apartments lately. They're all over the place, the constructs, and it's great. I love seeing that,
Like every time I've been to Seattle, there's like 500 cranes in the air every time I'm driving around.
I
don't know
it.
what they're doing, but there's always a.
I mean, I get what he's saying. Upzoning, the only way upzoning is going to be emitted is, like he said, immediate action by the people, appealing to the young people, of course. Even if we upzone, Destiny's solution is still the most reasonable one. We still got to build the homes, right? We still got to build these areas. So I don't necessarily know if upzoning is necessary. It's possible that these places already have the space, but they're just not building homes. And why they aren't building homes, I wouldn't be able to tell you personally. I'm guessing it's some type of, what is it called? Cost and I forget the terminology. But it's something, it has to do with some kind of a risk rewards thing regarding building homes and the potential value that may or may not be lost based off the home being built versus the home being bought. So that's the only reason why I can't see why they're not building homes. Other than that, I really wouldn't know why else. I don't know. It's a tough situation.
A lot over there, yeah.
Well, it's good. I mean, honestly, making more commercial real estate spaces, hopefully, in urban centers for for people to live in just would accelerate something that I would like to see happen, to make sure that some place like New York City isn't just Disney World for tourists, and when you go in and see a show or bridge and tunnelers and coming in and like, you know, I don't want to see a homeless person, that might make me uncomfortable, and they actually become livable spaces where people can afford to be. I think that's one of the biggest problems with housing, and it's just creating, as Ryan has been delineating, an entire generation of renters.
It's a big sell for decommodification too. We know housing first policies work for homeless people, like on average getting them off the street, and it's economically beneficial in the long run. And we also don't want to set things up so that you have like a dense urban core where all the cool stuff is, and you build new housing, but it's like an hour out. So you create like this sort of like scaled out issue where all the poor people have 4-hour commutes to get into their janitorial jobs. It's really difficult. Why did we decide to talk about the difficult problem?
I don't know.
There's no like easy conclusion. Hey,
There's some easy problems.
how about
Let's do
shutting
those.
down the government? Let's not. What about that? That's good, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to frickin' even keep track. McCarthy's not bringing that continuing resolution
No,
on the
they're
floor, right?
going to do it.
They are?
No, I mean, they're going to shut it down.
Oh, no, they're going to shut it
I'm
down.
going to be stuck in the airport for like 12 hours trying to get back.
Is Biden actually going to take that damn meeting with McCarthy? I really hope he doesn't.
I don't know. He probably will. He's that kind of a guy.
I know he is that
Right.
kind of guy. I know, but let the Republicans are reneging on the deal that they made back
What's
with the
point
debt
here?
ceiling. It's
I was
just
historically, who is usually held responsible for a shutdown? Is it
Republicans.
always like
Always
Republicans.
Republicans.
Yeah.
No, I'm not asking who's actually at fault. I'm
No, no,
saying in terms of
so
voter base,
always
they
voters.
voters
Yes.
hold. Okay, yeah. I'm
Same
fine.
thing with the impeachment on Biden, and it's going to be the Clinton effect, hopefully.
It's desperation, I think. They're running on fumes right now, right? The polling shows that the trans culture war stuff ain't working too well when it comes to mobilizing voters because
Oh, yeah.
it's marginal, you know?
You can only go through so many years of
Of-
which ironically funny, we talked earlier about like Biden's approval rating. I think one of the things that Biden has kind of done well is we went from probably the most inflammatory president ever to like the most chillest and least polarized. Like I don't know anybody that like really strongly supports Biden or really strongly hates Biden. He just kind of like does his thing. I think that's why the Republicans have kind of had to turn to like transitions and other things to fight for so
No,
long.
yeah, he's difficult to hate, which actually was a pretty good move, I guess. You know,
Yeah.
it's one like
Partly it
definite.
was not being black.
Oh, for
No,
sure. Oh,
key-
it's so. I
Yeah.
mean,
Key
he's like
decision on his
old,
part.
and
white,
not being
you know,
a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
80-year-old. Yeah, yeah. He's a very difficult person to attack on a personal or like
drives
civil
Republicans
bias.
crazy.
I call him anodyne. I feel like that's the best way to describe
Yeah,
him.
and it's why they go after Hunter so much as well. Because like you look at Joe and he's smiling and he's old.
Oh,
He-
Hunter's hard to hate too. You're like, just
Oh, he's
kinda
a
laughing,
badass,
Feel
yeah.
pathetic
For
about
cool
it, yeah.
people.
All right,
All right.
we're getting the
Yeah.
wrap. We're getting the wrap. And
Hunter is the badass. I don't know about all that. Interesting video. I'll probably just cut it out and then